Shift happens, sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance. And when it does, you have two options. You can either cling to the life you've outgrown or step into the version of you that knows she's meant for more. I'm Gia Lacqua, trauma-informed empowerment coach and founder of Radical Prioritization. Welcome to What the Shift, the podcast for women who've outgrown the life they've built and are ready to create one that finally fits. Here we get real about the shifts that change everything: identity shifts, career pivots, relationship resets, mindset breakthroughs, and learning how to finally release what's holding you back. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just be ready for what's next. It's time to shift. If you feel like life is shifting, you're in the right place. I'm Gia Lacqua, and welcome to What the Shift. Today, I am so excited to welcome my friend, Matt LeBris, to the show. Matt is a born and raised New Yorker who inevitably caught the hustler's spirit that fills his hometown streets. Matt is a top 1% globally ranked podcast host of the Decoding Success podcast, which has featured the likes of Mel Robbins, Grant Cardone, and many more. Formerly, Matt worked side by side with Damon John of Shark Tank and currently serves as a highly sought after personal brand strategist at Brand Builders Group, a top Inc. 5000 global personal brand strategy firm. Matt, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here today.
Well, I am so grateful to be here. And I am just thinking to myself as I hear you reading that, I just need to snip that and take that and I'm going to use it in different places. That was so good. I am so grateful for you, Gia. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you and obviously to everyone that's tuned into this. So thank you so much.
No, thanks for joining us. I'm excited to chat with you today. So Matt, before we dive into the good stuff, tell us a little bit so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Tell us about Little Matt. Give us a sense of who Little Matt was. What was he obsessed with? What did he dream of becoming? Who was on the posters on your bedroom walls?
Well, funny enough, my childhood bedroom still has a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader fat head. So, I don't know. Well, I just put it out there in the world, but I probably shouldn't have.
Are you still a Dallas fan?
I was never a Dallas fan, but I am a fan of blondes. So that just worked. Sense. That just worked, right? Teenage boy stuff. But I really appreciate this question because it goes to show the total difference in who one was to who one can be, regardless of what you experience in life, right? Younger Matt was troubled, not because he was a bad person or a bad kid or came from a bad upbringing or anything of the sort, but, there was a sense of being a black sheep. And, being a black sheep, it's tough because you can be loved, you could be in close physical proximity to people, rubbing elbows with people and still feel alone. And that's exactly who he was, right? And through that period of time, there were moments of, getting the love, the appreciation through achievement and things of that sort. Getting to the second part of your question, what was the dream? At one point, the dream was to be a train conductor. I was obsessed with trains. But as I got older, it was really to move into the realm of sports. And that took a devastating crash when I tore the labrum in my right shoulder playing baseball and then my left shoulder playing basketball. So that never happened. And all of the love and achievement that came from achievement, all of that love was just gone like that. And it left me in a place of feeling unknown, feeling lost, feeling like, hey, what do you do now? Because your source of getting everything that you wanted is now gone. But, the people that were on the posters, of course, that Dallas Cowboy cheerleader, but Michael Jordan, Derek Jeter, just the people that are absolutely great at what they do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And there's so much there I want to dig into. But first, tell us a little bit about, so you are a self-proclaimed black sheep. Tell us what that means to you. And how does that affect who you were?
Another great question. Black sheep to me is an individual, again, just someone that's in close proximity. I was never necessarily pushed away or anything of the sort, but it's kind of like you're just different, and not different I think I viewed it to an extent in a bad way. I was like, wow, I'm so different than my family. Mm-hmm. The people that you're supposed to, quote unquote, right? For the people that aren't watching, the people you're supposed to be close with, you're not close with. And it wasn't until I started to enter my very late teens, early 20s, where I started to find family outside of actual blood, you know? So like that black sheep was an individual who was just different. And I didn't necessarily realize the power in that until I started to own those differences and realize like, hey, that is a strong suit, not something that makes you weak or bad or anything of that sort. And it took finding people that also had those different qualities, those different characteristics, the different mindsets to feel accepted into something, right? So to answer your question in short here, a black sheep is someone who doesn't feel accepted. They might feel rejected. They might feel neglected. They feel isolated. They feel all of those pain points. Again, not necessarily intentional, but and maybe it is intentional if you want to get spiritual, like from a divine perspective, like maybe that was meant to be as a part of a grand scheme of things for a particular reason, which I have not necessarily uncovered in totality just yet, right? I think that's still part of the evolutionary process of myself, and I'm sure other black sheep or people that can resonate with that. But that's how I would describe it in short, and it's really not easy to navigate that, especially when you don't have the mindset or have other people in your life that are equipped to guide you through that. But have you ever felt that? Or am I the only one here? Am I a black sheep on this episode too?
You're not the only black sheep. I think, and I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that part of your story. I think it's an important one to your point in terms of how it's shaped you and where you are and who you've become. I think a lot of people experience that. I've experienced it for a good part of my life as well. I think the difference is, some people aren't able to put their finger on it. Some people aren't able to identify it. Some people aren't able to own it the way you own it because it has a connotation to it. So sure, you can call it whatever you want. I think as a human at a fundamental level, we all have a sense of belonging.
Yep.
And
Yep.
when you don't, you feel all those things you described, isolated, alone, questioning who you are, different. Does that make me bad? So, yeah, I think there's a lot there that we can all relate to at certain parts of our life. And then, that ties into how do you tap into the authenticity? How do you tap into maybe my differences are actually a strength or a superpower? But it takes a lot of inner work and healing really to come out the other side of that.
You hit the nail on the head, because what a lot of individuals do who experience this, and this speaking from experience, right? You become the chameleon.
Mhm.
And you pick up on the trend of,
Mhm.
hey, I really want to feel love and accepted from this particular person. What do I have to do to feel that love and acceptance? And you might try it and it might work. And then you might notice, wow, well, this person in your life is getting love and acceptance from the person you want. Let me try to be like them. Right. So you just start to try and like mold yourself into someone you're not. And that alone led me to what I refer to as homecoming, like the journey back to self. And I'm stealing that from someone, Dr. John Bradshaw. Have you read that book?
No, but I've heard the term.
I have to send you that book. It's a,
It's
it's
a
a
great term.
really, really good book. And homecoming, right? Just like coming back to who you are at your core self. And I can't say that I've done that in like entirely, right? But I think I've definitely peeled back some of the layers to be able to come here and not speak from a wound, but speak from something that has started to heal up a little bit, which is really cool. But yeah, like that chameleon phase is it's rough. It's rough.
It's rough. And it's also something that I think a lot of people can relate to because here's the thing nobody is born a chameleon. I can relate to it. I think for a very long time, I saw that as something to be proud of. I saw that as a skill. I saw it as something that made me really good at what I did is the fact that I could, and listen, there are certain qualities of
I,
adaptability,
I like that, Gia.
right?
I love that. I love where you're going with that. Yes.
There's a bright side and a dark
Mm.
side
I
to being
love
a
that you just
chameleon.
said that. That is, you just gave me the chills. I'm not even kidding. Like, I don't know if you see like literal goosebumps right now. That is such a good point to bring up, right? Like, because there is a sense of adaptability that you acquire as a skill set. And I think just the overall concept of what you just shared is so important. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Like, this is already gold. when you become the chameleon, like you have that sense of adaptability, and that sense of adaptability goes far beyond what we're talking about here, right? It goes into, hey, you just entered a new change or a new transition in your life. You could probably adapt in the snap of a finger, as opposed to someone who's like super rigid and they're just like in one way. Like, such a good point that you brought up right there. I'm like ecstatic. I don't know if you can see, I'm like smiling. I can't stop.
It's an important topic, and I
Yeah.
think I think a lot of us don't stop to really reflect on that, but yeah, I think, with that quality comes there's some great skill sets and the bright side, and then there's a dark side of that, which is, like, we lose touch with who we are,
Yeah.
and for so long, really putting other people's needs and wants ahead of your own,
Mm.
right? And eventually that can take a real toll on you. So it is an important thing to balance in terms of being adaptable, but still being true to who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, 100%. Like I remember there were plenty of situations where I grew resentment toward things that I actually loved because, for
Mhm.
baseball as one of them, because I felt like I was living out someone else's dream through this. And then furthermore, it was like something that I used as a way to gain love and appreciation and the spotlight for the 3 seconds it lasted when you hit the home run or whatever the case may be. But there's negative feelings that come about from stuff like that when you find yourself in a chameleon role. And I definitely have had those negative feelings, and it takes some unwiring and untangling to, part ways with them and get back to like an equilibrium with the people that, I mean, they didn't lead you to it. You really led yourself to it, right? So there's work to be done in that regard, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a coping strategy, it's an adaptive mechanism, but it's important to see it for what it is and make sure that you're balancing it. So I love how you talk about, your focus being sports. You had some injuries unfortunately along the way, which kind of gave you a maybe a detour, maybe a redirection in your life. Tell us a little bit about from an identity perspective. Like how old were you and how did that shift how you saw yourself and your identity?
Funny enough, I'm 32 today, and literally as I was making breakfast, I literally said to myself, there's still a level of regret around this. And this happened, luckily, I will say that it happened at a young age, entering college, freshman year of college, right? And that's a pretty pivotal point for, I think, anyone, right? Like, that's kind of like the entering adulthood phase for a lot of
Mhm.
people. But that was a lot of years ago, a lot. And it still comes up. So there was a point where there was a very numb, blacked out area of life for me where I just became pretty reckless, like felt bulletproof, just, was pushing the edge on a lot of things, and was really just being a kid in full transparency. Like, I guess that's the best way to put it. Like, I'm not trying to be judgmental on a younger version of myself, but was just being a kid, and a kid with not the best guidance or the best mentorship or the best example or anything of that sort. And I did not know who I was. Like, so when you
Mhm.
say identity, like there was no identity,
Mhm.
right? And I think even for a particular portion of my like sporting career, even though it came to an end in college, and while I might try to pretend that it still exists in a recreational perspective, like the identity even at that point was pretty much a facade. Like, I acted like someone that I actually wasn't. I was this like cocky, egotistical jerk. Again, not to be judgmental, but it's just the truth. Like, I really wasn't that person, but I wanted to protect something, and I don't know what that something was exactly, but there was no identity for years, even into college, even into probably a little bit into adulthood. And that all started to shift in, probably in the late 20s, and just realize like, hey, dude, like, are you cool with living 27, 28 years of your life as someone that you're not? Because I think that needs to change. And of course, it didn't come as subtle as that. It came as a complete 2x4 across the face, as it
Of
always does.
course. Of course.
Right. But that 2x4 was everything I needed to finally start to become like the individual that you're meeting today, who is someone that actually has an identity that's closer to self than closer to someone else, you
Mhm.
know?
The mask that you wore for
Yeah.
a long time, and many of us wear masks, often without even realizing it. That 2 by 4 moment, what did it look like for you? Like, how did you start to realize that you were wearing a mask, and how did you start to shed that mask?
Yeah, great question. Really good question. I think it was subtly coming through to the surface over the course of years, right? I was working with, a gentleman that's on national television 7 days a week and all of these things. And at a particular juncture, I decided to prematurely leave that role and go do my own thing. And in the process, I was like, wow, I'm succeeding and doing all this great stuff. I'm speaking all around the country and I knew I could do it. And it was great until it wasn't. And I was in a relationship and I just couldn't figure out why I was consistently anxious. Consistently. Like the minute I opened my eyes, I just felt it and it just turned on. And I'm like, wait, like, is this life? Kind of just having one of those moments like, is this how my life is going to be?
Yeah. Is this it?
Is this it? Right. Like, and this is literally happening at 27. So a few years ago. And
Scary.
I just said to myself, I'm like, man, like, dude, maybe you need therapy. And I don't know what it was that really just like took me over the edge. And I did therapy when my parents got divorced. But if I'm being fully transparent, I was in like 5th grade and I would go and literally like count the books on the guy's bookshelf. And I was amazed at how many times it would change. Like that's what therapy was back then. But this time it was serious, right? It was coming out of my own pocket and all of that. And the 2x4 came truly when I was told I was being treated poorly, and I did not know I was being treated poorly. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I kind of thought that's what love was because that's what love looked like for me for my whole life for the most part, right? Kind of like fighting for attention, feeling a little neglected, not having my needs met, but also not knowing what my needs were or how to communicate them. So, of course, I was anxious, right? I just was always striving. And that was the 2x4. And don't get me wrong, when that was relayed to me, it didn't just change overnight. I had to learn it the hard way because I'm just a stubborn person and, have to figure out things the hard way. Like who doesn't,
Yeah.
that's just a part of life. So it definitely took some time for that to set in. And then it did set in. And that was the big turning point, and I'm so grateful for that relationship to this day. I'm just like, if I was not in that, how much longer would I have gone?
Yeah.
Living life in that way, right?
Yeah.
So to the name of your podcast, The Shift, like that was the start of the shift, or at
That
least
was the
part of
start of
it.
the shift. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I love that. And it's amazing to reflect on those times and experiences in our life where we're saying, what is happening? Why is this happening to me? Because it's very, very easy to say that. And then using that as a turning point and recognizing, well, maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe this is
Yeah.
a moment for me to do something different.
So it's so interesting. You're so good at this, by the way, Gia. Like seriously, I wish I had the, I guess, maturity or whatever the proper term is to have the mindset that you just shared, right? Like at that point, I don't think that I saw it as a positive. I was
Of
just
course.
like, and I don't even know if I would to this day, right? Like I've had some shift moments still happen. We all do. I don't think they ever go away really. And I don't necessarily know if I view them as a positive in the moment, which is hard, but I'm curious, like, is there something that you would suggest to help someone in the moment see the shift as a positive?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and I appreciate that because I think most of us don't see it in the moment. I think most of us are too caught up in the woe was me, moment of, but I do think it's part of the journey and it's part of the what makes us who we are, as difficult as those times may be. I think the one mindset shift I would say in those moments is a lot of us do default to why is this happening to me? And I think a different way to phrase that question is why is this happening for me?
I have something on my desk somewhere, but I'm not going to rummage through things. I just moved, so like things are everywhere, but I have a little postcard that says that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
from Tony Robbins. And yeah, it's definitely something that I try to like keep in the forefront of the mind where it's like, hey, dude, like, life is happening for you. But at times when it's just all hitting the fan, it's like, ouch.
Ouch, of course. And
Yeah.
it's hard to come out from under that.
Yeah.
So, but I think it is important to look at it from a different perspective. And I think zoom out because we can become very myopic in those moments. And so how do we zoom out and say, okay, big picture, grand scheme of things, how important is this actually on a scale of 1 to 10? And give yourself some grace as well and recognizing that you're going to get through it. You're going to come out the other end and you have some agency in terms of directing that shift and the outcome. So I think it is important to recognize where you are and then what could be on the other side of that. And I think at the core, a lot of the work that I do with trauma as a trauma-informed coach is that post-traumatic growth of recognizing the growth that can happen after a traumatic experience or event.
Yeah. I had a really good conversation with Dr. Frank Anderson. Are you familiar with him by any chance? Yeah, he's fantastic. And it was a little uncomfortable to ask this question because it is trauma itself, or I'm not even going to use that word, just like overwhelming life experiences, because they're all different for everyone. Like it's a sensitive topic, right? Especially depending on what it is for the person. But I said to him, like, I was reading his book and he was just elaborating on, how he would strive to get these incredible grades and it led him to go to Harvard and all of these things. And I'm like, well, like, wouldn't you say that was beneficial for you? Like your trauma, your overwhelming life experience. And that really shifted the way that I started to look at a lot of what I experienced in life. Like I'm really grateful that now, right? I wasn't so grateful in the moment, but now I can look back, like you're saying, zoom out, and you used a really fancy word. You have great vocabulary, by the way. Like I could zoom out now or look back now, 2020 hindsight as we all have, and just like be so grateful for all of the crap, all of the turbulence, all of the shifts, all of the everything that got me here.
Yeah. It's that UConn education, by the way.
We're not going to go there today. We're not going to go there.
Not today. Okay. So tell us a little bit about what you talked to a lot of incredibly successful people. Tell us from your perspective, Matt, what separates high achievers who thrive from the ones who are still stuck in performance mode?
They turn inward as simple as possible, right? And it's funny because out of all of the interviews I've done and on working closely with some really incredible people, I still have conversations with people that have not turned inward. And it leads me to think that not everyone in this particular lifetime is meant to do that, and they could still achieve success, but I don't think they will. Who am I to say this, right? I'm catching myself as I'm sharing this. I'm going to get a little spiritual, right? Like I'm born and raised Catholic, a European family. I was always told, hey, you're going to have one lifetime. You learn that in Catholic school, right? Whatever the case may be. But I don't know. I'm just getting to a point now where I feel like individuals, not everyone has to go down the path that I went down or Gia went down, or has to heal or has to do that work or whatever the case may be. But what resonates most with me at this point, and why I feel like I have stronger conversations with like an individual with yourself, is because you resonate with this work, right? Like we're able to bond over this. Whereas there are other also successful people who just don't feel like they need to do this, and they're able to define success their own way and pound the pavement and grind and strive and hustle and be a part of that culture, and it works for them, right? But there's a part of me that sits here and says like, hey, I don't know if I know that's not my path, right? But ultimately there is a sense of me that says I really feel like to fulfill a soul's ultimate like service, ultimate purpose on this plane of earth, or whatever the case may be, is to really hone in on a deeper sense of just hustle or grind or success. And it's not just money, 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 and I've experienced it on both sides. I've had a lot of these conversations, and it's something that I'm a student of, so I'm forever expanding my mind on this topic. But ultimately for me, if I was to answer that in short, it really comes down to just what separates who I view as successful, who individuals view as successful and whatnot, is a sense of attending to the things that are hurting them. Because from experience, the pain that you use to fuel you will eventually like dry up. Like it eventually, like the gas tank hits empty. And that happened to me. I know it's happened to a lot of people I've had conversations with. Maybe it's happened to you too, Gia. But like once that gas tank is up, what's fueling you? Right. And I think from all of the conversations I've had, the individuals that find a new fuel source, they've leveraged pain to fuel them to an extent, but they found a new fuel source. And when they find that new fuel source, they take off exponentially.
So beautifully stated. And I can definitely relate to that. I know many others can as well. And you don't realize that it's the pain that's driving you, right? So many high achievers are driven by fear, by pain, unknowingly, and they're praised for their output. They're
Yeah.
praised for their quote unquote success. So we keep doing it.
Yeah.
And then we get stuck in that cycle. So for you, having been on both sides of that, we talk about purpose a lot. Uh, and it's an interesting thing because people ask me often about purpose and like, what does that mean? And what does it look like? So from your experience, I would love to know, what does purpose feel like to you in your body and in your mind and your decisions compared to being fueled by the pain?
I have never been asked that question before, and the first thought, like what I wanted to say is I truthfully don't know, right? Like a part of me wants to say that things feel easy, but again, going back to the beginning of this conversation, when you're a chameleon and you're able to adapt, even when you're being fueled by pain, things can feel easy. Right. So like I look back at times where I never really set the intention of, oh, let me go and get this person's attention, right? Like that was never really my intention on a conscious level, maybe subconsciously. But even in those moments, like I'm thinking back to one of I had this startup years ago and we were funded by IBM, which was fantastic. But in the moment of like pitching that startup to the panel of judges at this competition, like I wasn't necessarily doing that for attention on the conscious level, but it felt easy to do, right? So like there, and again, probably going back to the advice you gave us earlier, there's probably things I could take away from that that are positive, even if it was for attention, right? So circling back, I really don't know the answer. I guess it just feels easier, right? More just flow like, which might sound like a cliche answer, but it's something that I have to reflect on because I genuinely don't know. I'm curious what it feels like for you because I'm just like, hey, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your honesty. I think I agree. It feels easier and less tension. I think for me, I felt a lot of tension and friction when I wasn't aligned. And I think easier is a good way to describe it. I think the authenticity part is really important because your decisions are coming from within versus from outside of yourself, right? And I think you and I both talk about this, which is like the externally driven versus internally driven. And I think when we're driven by pain, a lot of it is externally driven, validation, praise, approval. For me, for a long time, it was this addiction to busyness. So I think that being driven by purpose is really tapping into your core, right? And really aligning with what's internal.
See, but what's interesting though, and I would love to go deeper on this if we have the time to, just like even being tapped into purpose and pursuing something purposeful or, something that has true intention behind it, positive intention, whatever it may be,
Sure.
like you can still feel the feelings of tension, of stress, of things of that sort. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I can tell you in the process of writing my book, in
Okay,
in
perfect.
yep, in writing some of my personal stories, there was a lot of tension and discomfort.
Yeah, like I think that's where I get tripped up a little bit. Not
Yes.
necessarily tripped up, but just like
Yeah.
if you feel a little anxious or you feel a little stressed or you feel a little tightness in your chest or you feel like, whatever you might feel in the moment, like
Correct.
that doesn't mean that we're like out of alignment or
No.
not operating from I think that's an important factor to
Distinction.
just,
Yep.
right, like because there are definitely still times, I'll tell you straight up, like when I went from, especially with the podcast, when I went to get a studio and start recording like that brought a whole lot of feelings.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, like I really love doing this. Do I not love it anymore? Like right. So like, yeah, you're experiencing it with the book. I think that's an important thing to just like put out there in the world. It's like, hey, you're still gonna feel feelings, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not purposeful or out of alignment or whatever the case may be. I think there's like a portion of society, and unintentionally I think that it's shared, that like if you're in alignment, quote unquote, that you're not going to feel anxious or that you're not going to feel nervous or you're not going to feel right. Like I don't think that it's portrayed well enough that you will still feel those things.
Absolutely. It's a really important distinction, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I think similarly, I talk about, busyness and survival mode, and even though I like to think that I'm out of that phase, I still fall into it. We all
Yeah.
fall back into it when things get a little hectic and crazy. So to your point, you will still feel discomfort and tension. I think the difference is, for me, at least from my own experience, when you peel back the layers and so something I never did is get curious with my feelings and emotions for many years, right? I dismissed everything or intellectualized them because it was just easier than having to feel them and get curious with why I was feeling these things. And so I think if you're able to unpack what you're feeling and why, and peel back the layers of the onion and get curious as to why you're feeling the tension, the tightness, the friction, right? For me, that's the only way I was able to overcome those feelings as I'm writing the manuscript for my book.
Well, when is the book coming out? You dropped it twice. Like, give us a little hint.
Yeah, so the book is scheduled to release in March of 2026. So I'm still finalizing the manuscript. But yeah, it will definitely have a shift message in there.
There you go. I love it.
Yeah.
March of 2026. It's on the calendar.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very exciting. But yeah, I think that's a really important distinction, and like understanding what's underneath the friction. So for a long time for me, I was at odds with the things that I value. I wasn't in alignment with what was
Yeah.
important to me. And that's what was causing the friction, versus this is hard for me because it's a part of an evolution of who I am, but there's an important message that needs to be heard and other people can benefit from it, and it's worth it, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is good, G. You're good at this. I hope you know that. It's
Thank
on
you.
record. It's being recorded.
From the man, the myth, the legend. Thank you. I appreciate that. So,
Absolutely.
Matt, just as before we wrap up, if there's one thing you want to leave our listeners with today, one message you want them to take away,
I think
what would that be?
I think a through line of a lot of what we're sharing, it comes down to an equation, and I'll give the gentleman credit because I did not come up with this. I failed out of college. I got kicked out of 2 high schools, so math was never my strong suit, although I did go back and graduate with Dean's List honors.
Nice.
Always have to put that out there. Not from
Nice.
Connecticut, not from
No.
UConn, from a totally different school, but perspective, right? So, John Gordon, I'm sure you're familiar with him, Gia. He has an equation in one of his books called E plus P, or not called, but E plus P equals O. And this is something that really stood out to me. I could read a book front to back and really like walk away with one thing and go back to it. I'm like, how did I miss all these other things? But this is just like one of the things that's like ingrained and etched on my heart and on my mind all the time. And going back to what you shared earlier, which I think was such a beautiful point for everyone to walk away with, E plus P equals O means events plus perspective equals the outcome. And you don't have control over every single event that takes place. We could walk out right after this interview and, God forbid, knock on wood, something could happen to both of us, right? Like, we don't get to control that. We might try to, but we don't have full control. What we do have control over is how we perceive it, right? And I think the through line of this conversation probably revolves a lot around perspective, how we perceive the chameleon skills, it is a skill to an extent, that adaptability, how we perceive the good that came about from our hardships or our overwhelming life experiences. In other words, that trauma that we might have experienced, right? That is what determines that outcome. And by no means am I sitting here saying, because we talked about this as well, that in the moment of a breakup or getting fired or losing a client or, not hitting a goal, by no means am I sitting there and saying, hey, see the good in that, or right on the spot, like sulk in it, do what you got to do. But long run, when you look back, and you're able to come with a fresh perspective, you're able to wipe the lens of your glasses and just look at that. That's what truly determines that outcome.
Perspective. I love that. Such a powerful message. Matt, I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story and your expertise. Where can our listeners find you?
Well, before I even say that, can I thank you for the opportunity, right? Like, such an awesome job.
Yeah.
Like, you are seriously a pro. Like, clearly you do this. I love it. I love watching you continue to do it. It was so great to experience it like this, and not just as a listener. So again, thank you. And then furthermore, like, obviously, thank you to the people that are tuned into this, like the individual that is still listening, however many minutes into this right now, 36, 43, 44, 45, right? Thank you for being here with us. To continue staying connected, more than happy to connect on Instagram at MATT_LEBRIS. I'm most active there. Of course, I have all the other platforms. I'm not doing TikTok dances, but that's really just the place to scroll. Most active on Instagram, so would be happy to chat with anyone there.
And your podcast?
Podcast, Decoding Success. We have a lot of fun with this. It is a challenge at some points, but it is a lot of fun. As Gia mentioned earlier, we've had some really great conversations with the Mel Robbins of the world, and the Gabby Bernsteins and the Dr. Nicole LePeras, and there, like I said, there's been some challenges, but we're coming back refreshed, and we took some time off and just kind of been on autopilot and have some really fun things in the works. So I'm really looking forward to it. That's on all major platforms, Decoding Success.
Awesome. And it's an incredible show. I love the work you're doing on it. So keep it up, and definitely tune in if you haven't checked it out already. It's truly amazing. So thank you for the work that you're doing and the good you're putting into the world.
I'm grateful for that. Thank you, Gia.
Thanks, Matt. And thank you for tuning in today. We will see you next week. Now go make shift happen. All right, Shifter, that's a wrap on today's episode of What the Shift. But here's the thing. Awareness is just the first step. The real shift happens when you decide to do something with it. So before you go back to business as usual, ask yourself, what is one thing you are done carrying? What's one shift you're ready to make? And if this episode hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and send it to a woman who needs to hear this, because we shift together. Remember, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take the next step. And I'll be right here next week, ready to shift with you. This is What the Shift, and we are just getting started.